The first time that I heard you doing a spot for FX Caprera, I was like, that's the first guy that I've heard on a commercial that just stands out from everything else. And I was like, I hope they take advantage of this because that guy is going to sell a lot of cars.
So, I was listening to your podcast on the way over here, or not on the way over here. I was grilling some chicken a little bit ago, and I was like, man, I gotta catch up on this podcast.
Yeah, it just got released today, so that was good.
Yeah, right. I saw that, and that's pretty cool, man. You got the Guns N' Roses. You're getting all these big names on there.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of them just fall into your lap because they've got new material that's coming out, so you reach out to the management, see if they're wanting to do anything next week. I've got John Bush from Armored Saint, and then also he was with Anthrax for their biggest album, Sound of White Noise, so I'm extremely excited about that. And then I'm going to throw an archive up with Seether, and then I've got Brendan Laverty from When We Were 30. He's going to be coming on next month, too.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then trying to get... I want to get Jerry Cantrell of Alice in Chains. He just released a new song today, so I'm going to try to get him for the podcast in the next month or two. So fingers crossed. We'll see.
Dude, that is cool. Yeah, there's so much going on. And it's cool talking music. Like now I've got a few bands want to come on to talk to me. I did the one with Josh Cox. You know, I'm a big country music fan. I like hip hop, but I do really got a thing for some rock and roll. Like Seether, there's sometimes when Seether can only soothe that itch. You know what I mean? There's some songs by Seether that just are amazing.
I think he's the best lyricist on the planet.
Yeah.
Like as far as a wordsmith goes, the way that he paints a picture, it's like nobody else. It's a lost craft. You know? It's sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Right.
Some people just throw words on there to kind of match some melody or whatever, but his words have depth to it.
That country song is just...
Oh, country song's great.
And then Gasoline is probably my...
Gasoline is very
country good. And Gasoline are two of my favorites.
Yeah, that entire... What was it? The entire album that has Fake It and Rise Above This... It's a powerful album because a lot of it he wrote about Amy Lee. It was after their breakup. And she wrote Call Me When You're Sober about him.
Yeah.
Pissed him off.
Yeah.
So he wrote an entire album about her.
Oh, yeah.
And it's brutal. It is angry, except for Rise Above This, which was written about his brother's suicide.
Oh.
But that's probably my favorite Seether album. Finding Beauty and Negative Spaces, I think it is.
Yeah, something like that.
But yeah, they're great. I mean, there's so many great bands that are out there. And Seether just released a new song, Judas Mine, which is a great song. So, and then, I don't know, there's just lots of great stuff, man.
Yeah. So what I do on this show here is my way of exploring the North Country. We've talked a few times, and you kind of... Some of your words about the area that when I've sat in your studio and we talked kind of inspired me to keep that eye out. Like you were like, dude, I came up here and I fell in love with the place, and that some of your words really, really kind of like, okay, well, if he made it up here, you know, this is a pretty good place to live.
It's a great place, man. Like when my wife and I came here, we came here from Charleston. And we'd called about a job in Nashville, but the position was just being filled that day. And the consultant said, well, I got another job in Watertown, New York. And I was like, I have no idea where Watertown, New York is.
Yeah.
But I was like, I'm open to anything. And it was between Watertown and Atlantic City. And we'd been in Fort Myers, Florida, and Louisville, Kentucky, and Charleston. And we bounced around some fairly sizable markets. And we were like, we'll just bounce up to Watertown and hang out for a year or two and see what happens. But yeah, I mean, it's a great community, and I think I told you when you came into the studio, everybody's got everybody's back.
Yes.
If there's, we've had the stuff that happened in Lowville recently, and if there's people that are in need, everybody steps up to help everybody else. They just do. And it's like, whether they have the means to or not, it's it's the most generous community I've ever been a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And it's CMN Radiothon that we do every fall.
Mm-hmm.
Johnny Spezzano, who's phenomenal, and there's nobody that does more for the community in radio than Johnny does. But
he's a good guy.
I kind of piggyback on what he does a little bit, and we go live on the air for 3 days. And over the course of 3 days, we raise anywhere between $100,000 and $130,000. In Charleston, South Carolina, where I was before that, which has got close to 1 million people, and their radiothon, they raise about $25,000. That's Charleston.
Yeah.
Watertown, which is a much smaller community, but it's just so tight-knit. They always step up.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, I'm absolutely going to give and help out kids in the North Country. It's just, I don't know, man. It's a community unlike any that I've ever seen before. Just everybody feels the need to step up to the plate and give what they can in times of need. So that's one of the reasons that we like it here. And then our kids, 2 of our 3 kids were born here, and my wife's made friends and I've made friends, and we've just kind of laid down the foundation. So
How long have you been here?
16 years.
16 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
And in the 16 years, I mean, there have been offers to move back to Fort Myers, move back to Charleston, Indianapolis, Daytona, to Syracuse to program, but we're just like, we kind of like it here. I like working for community broadcasters. I like the people that are in the building, and my kids have great friends. We live in a great neighborhood. I don't know. Yes, it's a small town. The winters are brutal sometimes, but it's just a great community. So I can't picture myself somewhere else. And you're so close to Syracuse. You're so close to the Canadian border. You're so close to the Adirondacks. There's so many different things that you can do. You can find things to do if you really like,
Yeah, and that's it is the thing. You can really, there's a lot to do around here if you get into it, and that's what this is about, And also, not only is it close to things, but it's far away from things too. Because I was talking to someone the other day, and there's no violence here. No. You know what I mean? I lived under Charlotte, dude, and there's people getting shot and stuff every day. There's, you got some weirdos walking around, but worst they're going to do is talk to you. You know what I mean? But it's kind of really safe place to be,
It really is. I mean, there's the occasional off the grid kind of thing that you hear, and there's, a house fire or something, something.
Yeah, I heard about. Yeah, I remember that.
But like when I was in Fort Myers, we lived around the corner from these teenagers that had set fire to somebody in the trunk of a car. And it's like, this is a neighborhood that we lived in, which was supposed to be a decent neighborhood.
Yeah.
That was, there's so much violence all the time around Fort Myers. And I loved Fort Myers. It was great. We spent 12 years there. But there's something about Watertown. It's just, you feel safe, I mean, a lot of people leave their doors unlocked because they feel like they have a nice neighborhood, and they have neighbors that are kind of keeping track of one another. So
yeah, as long as you don't leave a package on the porch, you'll be all right.
Yeah, the porch pirates. Yeah,
what do you call them? The porch pirates?
Porch pirates. Yes. Yeah, you got to watch for them.
Yeah, and I was at when your daughter was getting some awards. She won some pretty good.
She did.
Awards.
Yeah. She's she keeps us busy. They all keep us busy, man. Yeah. I mean, you've got kids, and it changes you. It changes your whole perspective, your whole outlook on life. Like before kids were born, my wife and I are like, hey, let's bounce to different markets and let's just see the world. And then when you have kids, you're like, no, we got to lay down roots. We got to find a foundation. We got to keep them safe. And then all of a sudden you're prepping for their future, and you're just kind of solidifying. It's I don't know, it's a different mindset, but.
And I think that could be part of that. You know what I mean? You've been to places and familiar with some, violence that happened and crazy stuff. Yeah. And then when you had kids and you were here, you were like, wow, this is a pretty good place to be.
Well, you get into protect the pack mode.
Yeah.
And you want to be in the best environment for your kids, so yeah, you're very regimented in making sure that they do well in school and that they're surrounded by the right friends. And then, integrating them into sports, letting them be social, letting them, there's so much that goes on to And you know, you have the YMCA that has so many different activities and different sports and different things that they can do. And the schools, I've had no problems with the schools, man. I mean, the teachers are great, and the counselors are great. And my wife works in the school system, so it's like she's been integrated to see all these different, you know, places that my kids. It's a great area. I've got nothing negative to say about it, you know, except every now and then it gets to be negative 40 in January, and my car won't start.
Let's go to your podcast real quick.
Cool.
It's called Lancer's Lounge.
Yes, backstage and unfiltered.
Yes. So I think you might have missed something with the most rock and roll last name of all time.
What's that?
Hale. Somehow that should have been in there.
You know, when I was in high school
Yeah.
and I was thinking about radio,
Mm-hmm.
the nickname that was given to me by this kid named Flynn, he called me Lancer all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know, when you're a kid, you just kind of hate everything about your name, but whatever you get, when you get a nickname, you're just like, that's kind of cool. So as soon as I started in radio at 18, Lancer, that's just been it. You know, people have all sorts of different radio names and they come up with something wild and
Carolina's Chuck.
I love it. That's perfect though.
Yeah.
That's perfect, man. And it fits your personality, and you have such a huge personality. And I love it, man. The first time that I heard you doing a spot for FX Caprera, I was like, that's the first guy that I've heard on a commercial that just stands out from everything else. And I was like, I hope they take advantage of this because that guy is going to sell a lot of cars. As soon as I heard it, man, I was like, that's just, it was, dude. It was a breath of fresh air. I was impressed. And then when I got a chance, I think I met you on our boat cruise last year for the first time.
Yes.
And
When we
chatted
came
up.
off the boat
Yeah.
cruise, we were standing out there talking.
Yeah.
So I was telling last week we were talking about I've always wanted to get into radio when I was a kid. You know what I mean? Like I listened to John Boy and Billy growing up.
They're great.
And the rock and roll stations around town, the Rise guys were, I don't know if
The Rise guys,
yeah,
too,
I love those guys. I've heard them coming up and I've always thought, you know, morning radio is the kind of way to go. I mean, obviously I've never pursued it or anything, but when they were like, hey, you want to do a radio commercial? I was like, man, I've always wanted to do this, you know? And then it helped that I really understood branding, you know, like I studied that a little bit and then really I watched Private Parts.
Right, with Howard Stern.
Yeah, and I learned that as long as you be yourself on the radio, you can't fail. I mean, unless you just fail, you know?
But that's the reality of it. And that's, you know, there's always the question, how is radio surviving? Radio's surviving because the people that are on the radio are genuine. And you kind of learn that going in is that you have to be yourself. And as long as you are and you're not trying to put up some front and be somebody that you're not, because you're not selling so much anything as you're just trying to be a friend to the people on the radio, the people that are listening. You're trying to make a connection.
Right.
And you make real connections between talking to them on the phone and seeing them at shows and seeing them out and about. So as long as you're just yourself and you don't flip on a light switch to where it's like you're somebody different on the radio and somebody different off, you're good. So.
And speaking on podcast and radio survival, is that somehow go together? Do podcast help with the radio and vice versa? Is that
It's kind of the evolution of things.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's got a podcast, it seems, and you know, mine's just another one that's thrown into the mix. But I like talking to musicians, and I like finding out a little bit more behind, you know, what's the inspiration for them doing what they do. What got them into music? You know, what early shows did you see? What early bands? You know, what's behind this particular song? You know, like, and you learn something new all the time. Like Candlebox, great band. Their first album, Far Behind, huge hit. And then I talked to Kevin Martin, the lead singer of the band, and I had no idea that song was about Andrew Wood. And Andrew Wood was the lead singer of Mother Love Bone, which was one of the first bands that really got a major contract out of Seattle. And they had basically all the members of Pearl Jam sans Eddie Vedder, but Andrew died of a heroin overdose. He was like 27 years old, part of the 27 Club.
right? That's true.
And Kevin was like, yeah, Andrew was like a big brother to me. And, you know, and he kept me off drugs and I'd go and hang out and I was just a teenager and he was, you know, this big personality, and everybody in Seattle loved him. And he passed away. Far Behind was just my way of paying tribute to him and my way of saying, I'm not far behind you, and I learned less. I mean, it's just like, oh wow, I had no idea what that song was about. I just loved it.
Yeah.
But it's fun to just kind of dig a little deeper, because a lot of those artists try to leave things open to interpretation. But when you dig a little bit deeper, it's just, I don't know, it's kind of fun. And so that's
and with the doing it on a podcast, there's also the fact that you'll get to talk to a radio or artists on the radio, and then all of a sudden it's live and it just goes away. You know what I mean? So when like if say you talk to an artist and some of your listeners like, oh, I wanted to hear that and they missed it,
right?
And it's somebody they love or whatever. This gives them an opportunity to go back to that too, and listen to it in a different way. And
I'm not limited, because with most of the radio interviews that I've done through the years, you've got 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes to do an interview. So you've got to pick the 3 or 4 best questions that you want and roll with it. But with the podcast, you can go 10, 15 questions, really dig a little bit deeper, and then, play excerpts from it. Like I'll play something, I'll call it One Answer with Lancer. And I'll do one particular question. Like with Dizzy Reed the other day, it was, how did you know that you were the guy, that you were going to be in Guns N' Roses?
Yeah.
And it was a great answer. And it was, it's fun to just dig a little deeper, and you can play parts of it to kind of tease the podcast. And
that was a good podcast, by the way.
Thank you.
That was really good. I listened to that one and the one with Lizzie Hale, and what was the one with the guy that you used to work with? I can't remember his name. He was in the radio business.
Ken Anthony?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ken Anthony's like a mentor to me.
Right.
The guy's fabulous. I learned a lot from him. He used to work for this online magazine called allaccess.com, and every radio person would gravitate towards that every single day. They had all the news of everything that was happening with music, with radio, with television. You would go there to get your downloads. They would go there for interviews. You would go there and see pictures. You would go there to see the ratings. You would go there to see songs, how they were. I mean, it was just like everything was there. And then it just went away last year. And Ken is now working at a classic rock station in Sacramento, California, doing great. But I love that guy, man.
Yeah.
Got nothing but kind words for him.
Yeah, you picked a good one, because he was a talker. You didn't get many words in.
That's great, though. I've done interviews where it's like sometimes they just have no answers at all. It's yes, no, I don't know. And you have to drag it out of them. But when you have somebody that can just open up and go, those are the best interviews.
I was doing overhead, doing metal roofing.
Right.
I laid out of work one day to go work for free for the stair guys, just to show them I could do it, because I didn't want to work. All the guys doing the metal roofing were like on drugs and stuff. It was really like crazy. Like the kid wrecked the truck, and I'm like, this is insane. I don't want to do this anymore.
No.
So I laid out of work with those guys to go work for free. I was to show my wife's uncle that I could do it, because it was a lot of heavy lifting. And about 2 years later, I quit that job to go hang handrail and learn more about the stairs, and ended up coming back as a manager, then leaving that company altogether, getting into sales. Did sales for a couple of years, and left that company to get back into custom work to sell, and ended up here.
Now you call it luck, but it's also believing in yourself.
Yeah.
And it's also being willing to take a chance, and taking a chance on yourself to go and try something different.
Right.
And so it's like, I'm sure it plays a part in it, but it's also because you knew that you were capable of taking on something new, and you're making,
And during those times, there was a lot of studying. Like, it wasn't just a whim. I YouTube read a bunch of books on sales. I studied management. The moves were calculated, and I guess, and I knew that I could do more. And like I said, I knew my work, and I've always been pretty good at talking to people. I knew I wanted to work my way back into sales. I liked car sales. It was just where I was at was not a great place.
Right.
And, cars, I'm not the biggest car guy in the world, but I love it, because I like sitting down and helping people solve a problem.
Well, you're also a people person, and I'm sure that being in sales, specifically
Yeah.
selling cars, it's about connecting with people.
Yeah, and when I got up here, man, I hadn't sold cars since '08 and '09, you know,
wow.
so all these cars had different, like, and they put me on a lot of stuff, with different things. So I'm like,
Right.
all right, you know, now I know a lot about cars,
Right.
you know, but when I first got here, it was all personality, you know. I was like, all right, guys, let's get in this thing. They asked me a question. I said, I don't know, let's Google it. And then I would just go on all the test drives and I'd figure out everything with the customer. I'm
Right.
like, so, you know, and then we have people up there that know everything. So, I mean, if they had a question, I could figure it out, you know, but it was a lot of personality, you know. And that's kind of what led me to this. I'm like, you know, my thing is personality, so I can't really do a podcast on cars, you know.
No.
I mean, I can, but I think if I just bring my personality out, like if I was you want to come to FX Honda, we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. But
He will still sell you a car.
I'll still sell you a car. But dude, so I wanted to get that background on it. And when you came up here, you worked for community broadcasters.
I've been here
right
the
away.
entire, yeah, right off the bat.
So who did you meet with?
Jim Levin and Johnny Spezzano drove down to the airport and picked me up.
Uh-huh.
And then they brought me up and talked with them like the entire trip about music and, you know, specific playlist and what I would do differently. And, you know, just, you know, what's your concept and your philosophies. And then when we got here, Jim took off on a meeting and Johnny basically gave me a tour of the North Country, drove me around for like an hour and a half. And, you know, you sort of get a feel right off the bat, okay, here's a guy that cares.
Yeah.
And it's like, and everybody knows Johnny Spezzano. He's like, he's the greatest guy.
Mm-hmm.
And give you the shirt off his back. And he's kind of like the poster child for the North Country.
Yes.
You know, it's like, and maybe people follow his lead because that's his personality. But then I started to meet other people at the station. And one of the things that you look for when you're looking for a new job, especially in radio, because there's so much turnover. And it's like there's been so much paring down and so many people being laid off in other companies. You look for longevity of people that have been there. Everybody in the building had been there 10 years or longer. And I was like, okay, well, this is a company where people stick around.
Mm-hmm.
So that made an impression. Like, I didn't even go to interview for the job in Atlantic City. I just told my wife, I was like, we're not moving to Atlantic City.
Right.
Because, like you said, crime. And that was a big thing. Because my wife was pregnant with our second kid.
Mm-hmm.
And we had our first, which was only a year and a half, 2 years old. And she has special needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, the last thing that I want to do is go to Atlantic City and then there's crime around. And I don't want that for my family.
Yeah.
So we came here. And best decision I ever made, man. Best decision I ever made.
I love it, dude. I think we're going to end right there.
Beautiful.
All right. Appreciate you.
Yeah.